Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the joint Albright Institute of Archaeological Research and Friends of ASOR webinar series with our second webinar in the series. My name is Rachel Bernstein, and I'm happy to start this evening with a few words before we kick off today's program. This season, Friends of ASOR has an outstanding lineup of speakers, including upcoming webinars from Britta Lorentzen on December 3rd and Michael Hundley on December 17th. ASOR aims to offer all webinars for free during the 2025 to 2026 season, thanks to the generous support of our members and friends. Don't forget that we've extended our webinar challenge month since 2 anonymous donors generously pledged $3,000 in matching gifts to support the program, and the challenge has now been extended through November 26. So far, we have raised $1,765 of our $3,000 goal. This match is too good to let slip away, so if you're able, please consider a gift of any amount to the webinar program by November 26 to help us reach this goal. An email containing details for the webinar recording and making a gift will be sent after the webinar. We also hope to see you at the upcoming ASOR annual meeting next week from November 19th to the 22nd, which will take place in Boston and online. If you can't join us in Boston next week, you can still register to catch the sessions and the plenary by Dr. Timothy Harrison on Wednesday evening virtually by going online at asor.org/am. Finally, ASOR would also like to remind you that you can purchase the link for the recording of any past Friends of ASOR webinar or buy a bundle of all the webinars from past seasons prior to 2024. You can also view any webinar using ASOR's online library platform. Details and registration can be found on the ASOR website or in the forthcoming email with the recording information from this evening's webinar. You can also ask for more information by emailing Reagan at the ASOR office at membership@asor.org. And now, lastly, I'm very delighted to introduce Shua Kisilevitz, the Assistant Director of the Albright Institute, who will be our wonderful moderator for today's program.
Thank you, Rachel, and hello to everybody. Oh, I think I'm a little dark in here. So welcome back. This is our second of 4 joint collaborative presentations we're doing along with the Friends of ASOR, and we're really very, very happy to be able to do that. Hosting it here at the Albright Institute in Jerusalem. And so thank you to the crowd who's sitting right in front of me. All of you have had a nice drink of wine and some nice food. And just keep in mind, we're here to listen to some lectures tonight. I am starting, and I'm filling in today for Jamie Fraser, the director of the Albright Institute. Jamie is actually en route right now. In fact, he left 2 hours ago on the way to the United States so he could attend the annual ASOR meeting. So you can see on the slide here, we are all very excited about this meeting. Most of the people, this is when I know Israel gets depleted of archaeologists during this time. This is why for the next 2 weeks, both our program, the Albright and the Friends of ASOR, we do not have events. So you will notice that our next event, for both of us, our next event is going to be on December 3rd. So anyone who cannot make it to the ASOR annual meeting, you can go online through asor.org/am and join online. But I also would urge you to all visit our websites, the Friends of ASOR website and the Albright website, to see our future events, upcoming events. And I can tell you at the Albright, we have 2 special events planned for December for Hanukkah and for Christmas. So yes, we shall start. Why? Everybody turn your phones off, please. It's my pleasure to introduce our panelists tonight. We have 3 panelists. 2 of them are here with us at the Albright, and 1 is in the United States. So our first speaker is Dr. Igor Kreimerman, who is a senior lecturer in archaeology and ancient Near Eastern studies at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. Igor directs the Seltz Foundation HUJI Excavations in memory of Yigael Yadin and serves as scientific advisor to the renewed excavations at Beit Mirsim. His research focuses on social and economic structures of Bronze and Iron Age Levantine societies, as well as on human-induced site formation processes, particularly those related to construction and destruction. Our second speaker is Dr. Michael Freikman, who holds a PhD in archaeology from the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He has studied the megalithic architecture in the ancient Near East, excavated at Rujum el-Hiri, and participated at the excavation and publications of Kirbet Kayafa, Shal Golan, and Tel Tzaf. Michael presently directs the renewed excavations at Beit Mirsim, and both of them will be speaking about these excavations. And our third and final speaker for the evening, presenting from New York, is Dr. Rachel Hallote, professor of history, at Purchase College, SUNY. Rachel's research involves British and American archaeologists who excavated in Ottoman-controlled Palestine in the 19th century. Rachel has worked at numerous archaeological sites in Israel, including Tel Mithne and Megiddo. Her publications include Bible, Map, and Spade, the American Exploration Society, Frederick Jones Bliss, and the Forgotten Story of the Early American Biblical Archaeology, and the co-authored volume, The Photographs of the American Palestine Exploration Society, as well as many articles about archaeology and history of the discipline. She currently co-hosts an archaeology podcast called This Week in the Ancient Near East. As the title of our event this evening suggests, the topic is American archaeology in the Southern Levant, discussed through the lens of the works of William Foxwell Albright, who's the namesake of the institute I'm standing in today, and particularly his work at the site of Beit Mirsim. I would like to welcome our first guest speaker, Igor Kreimerman, who will talk about Albright's excavation at Beit Mirsim in light of the renewed excavations launched at the site. Igor, please.
Okay, so thank you very much, Shua, for the introduction, and thank you all to all of you here and all of you online for coming and joining us this evening. It's especially I'm especially honored to give this lecture basically in the living room of William Foxwell Albright. That's exactly the hall where we all sit now. So it's a great privilege. And of course, when Michael and I went back to Beit Mirsim, we knew that it was a site that was excavated by William Foxwell Albright, one of the greatest archaeologists of the 20th century, at least in this area. It was a great honor and a great, we were even a bit afraid to go to the site where he excavated with all these achievements. And of course, I cannot cover all of what he did because I have only 15 minutes, but I'll try to touch upon several points in what on his scholarship and how it influenced research and how we see it today. Before Michael Michael will go later into the particulars of how the excavations went and what were the logistical challenges and what was the method of excavation and so on. So first of all, Beit Mirsim is located in the southern Shephelah, just between the lowlands and the highlands of Hebron. Before Albright came to the site was pretty much unknown, in the middle of nowhere. It was one of the larger mounds in the Shephelah, but definitely not the largest one. Tel Edwer is known as Tel Achish, is of course much bigger. And in fact, one of the greatest questions that we don't know the answer to is why did Albright choose this particular mound out of all mounds? But nonetheless, Albright's excavations were very much influential. And here you can see the plan the general plan that he generated for Beit Mirsim. He concentrated on two areas, and here you can see the plan of the late Iron Age, Iron Age 2B. And you can see here entire neighborhoods, complete structures, a network of streets, and really one of the greatest achievements of Albright in his excavations was the fact that he was able to generate quite coherent plans of Beit Mirsim with a grid of streets, and each of those strata was nicely separated from the others. And that was a great achievement, because back then in many of excavations, when stratigraphic excavation was still in its early stages, we don't get such nice plans. In many cases, when we look at those plans today, we see that basically structures from different periods are intermixed. And the reason that Albright was able to do that is that he basically combined stratigraphic excavation together with pottery analysis, and he solved stratigraphic problems by looking at the pottery. And consequently, what his greatest achievement at Beit Mirsim is basically that he was able to create a clear typology for pottery for many phases, each phase clearly defined and clearly separated. And that stands in contrast to many of the previous typologies where pottery types had, so to speak, long life, too long life. Some pottery types allegedly continued for hundreds of years without a change, and that was basically a result of stratigraphic mishaps, because in many other excavations, pits were not identified properly, and therefore pottery from earlier periods was intermixed with pottery from later periods. So Albright really created this pottery sequence, which was quite reliable. And I worked with the late Professor Amnon Bentor and with many other scholars at the Hebrew University, and they told me that once they studied archaeology in the 1950s, they had to memorize the stratigraphy of Beit Mirsim by heart. That was a key site, because that was the site that you would compare all the pottery from your excavations to. Only later, the renewed excavations of Hatzor and of Afek, or from many other sites, really refined this typology and reached a greater level of precision. But back then, that was the type site for Levantine archaeology and the type site for comparing pottery and dating pottery. Now, because it became such an important site for studying the chronology of the entire region, one of the biggest mistakes of Albright regarding the absolute dating of the layers really influenced Levantine archaeology for decades, because he found this seal on a storage yard that today we know it's a storage yard from the Lavmelech type, and this seal impression reads Eliakim Na'ar Yuchan, and Albright interpreted Yuchan as Joachim, one of the last kings of the kingdom of Judah, and therefore he basically assumed and he dated the last destruction layer of Beit Mirsim to the early 6th century BC, what today we would identify as Iron Age 2C, or and definitely the early 6th century BC. By the way, here you can see an excerpt from his notebook where he really drew this impression and deciphered it. So basically, once he dated this layer to the early 6th century BC, all layers with contemporary pottery could be easily compared to this stratum at Beit Mirsim and were dated to the same period of time. And it was only during only about 40 years later, or at least 30 years after Albright's publication, that it was realized, or at least most scholars agreed, that Albright was wrong about that, and that in fact this jar and the pottery of this stratum should be dated, in fact, to the late 8th century BC, and that's a destruction layer dated to Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, the famous 701 BC destruction layer, and not to the early 6th century BC. The first one, or among the first ones to offer this new dating, was Olga Tafnel after the excavations of Lachish. But back then, many scholars challenged her, to some extent also due to Albright's prominence and his stature in the field of biblical archaeology. And only after the excavations of David Sishkin at Lachish, the consensus shifted, and now we know that basically this stratum is dated to the late 8th century BC, and basically the habitation at the site of Beit Mirsim ended probably in the 8th century BC and not in the early 6th century BC. So Albright's greatness was also one of the reasons for this great mishap in Levantine chronology. Now, when we came to excavate Beit Mirsim, we thought, of course, where to excavate. So Albright excavated primarily in two areas, the northwestern area and the southeastern area. And in the southeastern area, he really was able to excavate the entire sequence spanning from the early Bronze Age all the way to the Iron Age to be to the 8th century BC. So we decided to open our excavation area just by his area, but not within the borders of his area, so that we can really get an entire sequence if we wish, but nonetheless not to mess with his results and with his dumps and so on. And in fact, when you look at the location of the dumps, they are marked here yellow. We are just located by those dumps because Albright wanted to save energy, save money. So he basically excavated the material and just dumped the sediment just outside the borders of his excavation area. We also know that actually he paid the locals to backfill everything. So they took the money, but did not backfill. So the site still looks like that to this very day. And here you could see one of Albright's dumps from our excavation area. And one of the things that we found out immediately once we started excavating the site is that it's a fabulous site for any archaeologist, because you see we just got a few centimeters below topsoil, and already we found the 701 BC destruction layers. And here you could see the fabulous loom weights that come up from this destruction layer. And really, just after a short excavation, we were able to, just for a few seasons, we were able to excavate an entire architectural compound of domestic structures and a large olive press installation. And all of that is lying just below topsoil, and all of that is covered by a destruction layer of ash, soot, charred wooden beams, and a lot of burnt bricks. So making it basically the perfect lab for household archaeology and studying the daily life of Judean society. And here you can see the olive press that we excavated. I'll elaborate a bit about it in a few minutes. And then we have the collapse of the roof with all the loom weights that were probably used on the roof. And it was probably they were probably part of a vertical loom. And really, everywhere we were excavating, we're just getting more and more of those finds, facilitating really a reconstruction of the last days of the site prior to destruction by the Assyrians. Now, when we read Albright's excavation report, then of course we can clearly see that his emphasis was on chronology, and that indeed was his greatest achievement. But luckily, he was very observant, and he had quite a few spectacular observations that he documented in his report. One of them is related to the olive presses that he found. Now, he didn't identify them as olive presses. He did identify them as dye plants. But nonetheless, he did document all the finds very nice from a spatial point of view. And here, for instance, you could see a plan of two of the olive presses that he excavated. And he noted that always when you find those vats, you find crashing basins by the vats. And also, normally between the vats, there is an embedded storage jar. And also on the side of those vats, there are hallmark jars or jugs or storage jars just adjacent to those vats. And he also describes that in many cases he found charred material or even ash, and he had some speculations about what that could be. And one of the best things about Beit Mirsim, that this site behaves very nicely. Whenever you want to find something, you normally find it, if your requests are within reason, of course. So we really wanted to find one of those olive press installations. And indeed, already in the first season, we reached the top of those two vats. And after a few more seasons, the entire installation was uncovered. And you could see here a number 1 and 2 of the vats. Number 7 would be the crushing basin for the olives with the weight stuck inside, suggesting that the olive press was not active when the site was destroyed. Number 5 is a place reserved for the wooden beam for pressing the olives. And in number 8, where you have those two number 8, that's exactly where we found those 2 jugs, just like Albright. So that was a great discovery. We really wanted to find it, and indeed it was found. And when we examined the contents of those jars, we indeed found some charred remains of crushed olives. So what we understand basically is that that probably the residue from pressing the olives was moved to those jars probably to use as fertilizer, or maybe for extracting additional olive during using heating, or for some other purposes. But nonetheless, thanks to Albright's careful documentation, we know that it's not just a coincidence, but it's actually a pattern recurring throughout the site. And that's one of the Albright's greatnesses, that he was really observant, and he has all of those observations that really help us now when we come back to the site with new methods for studying the remains. Now, one of Albright's goals in the excavation was to excavate the site itself, and he really concentrated on the site. He wanted also to find the graveyards around the site, and regrettably he never found them. Those who found them were looters several decades later, who just explored the site. They found those burials and they looted them, and many of those the artifacts from those burials found their way into antiquities market, and that prompted the Israel Antiquities Authority to really excavate some of those tombs, and to document some of the artifacts or some of the features outside the site. Now, what we discovered during our excavations is that actually there's much more around the site than Albright even imagined, because we conducted just a few weeks ago a large-scale survey around the site, and everywhere we looked, we basically saw walls and additional features that suggest potentially that actually Beit Mirsim might have had a lower city. And the preliminary results show that maybe that area was actually inhabited also in the 7th century BC, and even maybe the early 6th century BC. So Albright was wrong about the habitation on top of a mound, but probably not outside the mound. So that's another interesting feature, and that also reflects a change in the focus of archaeological excavations in the past decades. Archaeologists don't concentrate only on the mound itself, but they investigate also the surroundings of the site to get a more complete view. So that also facilitates us putting Albright's results in a much broader context. So I will stop with these 3 observations, and I'll finish with this picture of Albright's expedition and our expedition, our renewed excavations. And I'll thank you for listening, and that's it. That will be it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Igor. That was absolutely fascinating. And I couldn't help but think that this is very similar to Beit Shemesh, with the lower city that was just exposed recently in later periods over there. Not right now. We'll do questions at the very end. In his talk, Michael Freikman will take us further into Albright's expedition, focusing on the people behind it. But before Michael begins, I'd like to share some exciting and little-known news. That is, it's not really been published yet. And that is that last year, Jamie Fraser, director of the Albright Institute, was contacted by Abigail Feldman, Albright's great-granddaughter, and he met with her and her mother, Nancy Schoenfenthal, in the United States last November. And the family generously offered the institute, that is the Albright Institute, Albright's personal archive of photographs and letters, which we now have. So you can see the meeting over here, and looking at some of the artifacts, Jamie with the family members. This collection is now housed at the Albright Institute under the care of Alejandra Sanchez Rubalcaba, and she has prepared a report on the condition of this collection, and she will be working on it as part of the Albright's digitization project. And this project, I'm very happy to be able to say, has just recently been funded by the US government, and we will conserve, digitize, and share the Institute's unique collections, including the newly acquired Albright Family Archive. So what is in this archive? It contains letters from Albright to his mother. This is very much his personal archive, and also photographs of various sites and vistas that he had visited, some of which have not yet been identified, including, by the way, you can see at the top right, the newly constructed Albright Institute, which was then the American Schools of Oriental Research. It also contains the photos from Albright's very first visit to Beit Mirsim. So drawing on these and other sources, Michael Freikman has explored the human side of Albright's expedition, and he will share some of his discoveries with us now. Michael, please.
It just works. It works. Okay. First of all, I want to apologize. I haven't been speaking in public for like ages. So I'm not very sharp. So indeed, I was given a really rare opportunity to work actually with two archives. One of them with this one mentioned right now, and it's really something else to go through the letters. One of them actually written to his father in 1916, just before he finished his PhD. Albright, finishing his PhD. And the other one is in Pittsburgh, in Ksenia Theological College. So I was allowed to go through the collection, which is huge. Actually, most of the material found in Beit Mirsim is right now there. And a lot of documents also kept there. So I actually going to speak now, this really short speech, more about the expedition itself. Not what they did, but how they did it, and all the challenges and all people behind it, as much as it possible, indeed, in these 15 minutes. So first, the work in the field itself, of course. Albright learned a lot from Clarence Fisher, one of the most prominent figures of early 20th century, now I think almost totally forgotten. He was the one who actually introduced to Albright this method of excavating by squares, although these were much larger squares, not squares that we know today of 5 by 5 meters with bunkets and everything, no bulks really, but it gave him this possibility to produce a really proper documentation, even given the scale of the work. You can see here at the peak, there were up to 140 people in the field. It really was not easy to run such a project, but he managed, as Igor showed, really large areas showing the whole neighborhoods, large portions of the city, understanding the city planning, something that really not always was possible. Fisher also introduced him several people who are really mastered the field work, like foremen that were brought from Egypt, and even people like the cook of the expedition and surveyors, and I will mention at least some of them later, and was really a lot of really of help. So you see a few, I think most of them were never published. This is the southeastern area of the excavation, and you can see actually the street, Iron Age street that they're excavating at this moment. This area doesn't exist anymore because they got down to the Bronze Age and all this was removed and destroyed. Here you can see at the lower corner, this is the aerial picture taken that we took today, like months ago. And this is actually the gate, the city gate, Iron Age city gate, being excavated with a labor force. I mentioned them in a second. He also, again, he really concentrated on excavating inside the city, but he really invested a lot of resources into excavating outside, meaning the ramparts dated to the Middle Bronze Age. And actually, today you can still see them. Our area is just above this rampart. this rampart is seen today because Albright actually managed to excavate the rampart to clear it from dirt. This is actually the only find that I'm going to show here, and the picture at the right, you can see actually how it was published. They had a lot of, again, challenges publishing the material. And this is a figurine dated to the Iron Age, and it's, if not unique, that's very, very rare. I actually don't know any parallels, at least in the Middle East, at least to this. We know of many, many figurines of Asherah or Asherah with a child. But this one, you can see actually, I don't know if you can understand what you see here, but you see the baby is actually sitting on her neck, on her back. There's supposed to be another head here. And this, again, from this drawing, it's very hard to tell if you don't really see the object itself, what it is. But this one is really, really unique. And again, it's in the storehouse in Senia in Pittsburgh right now. So I wanted to show you this because, again, this figurine is kind of forgotten today. Now, they really invested a lot into the proper recording, into the documentation, and they had every day, actually, there were a logbook with recording every object, including in many cases pottery shards, like fragments of rings or vessels, or as you can see here, it's not a sealing, but it's an impression of a seal in a cooking pot. So every object, it was rubrica with the location, with the description, with the date, with everything. Now, these logbooks are lost today, but they were saved on the microfiches. If you remember, even this is obsolete now, but actually everything is in these pictures right now. And also there was a logbook that Albright himself written down every day, and it's not easy to read his handwriting, but actually it combined the description of the finds and kind of a brainstorm room inside this diary. He was discussing, you see here, people who work with mill bronze pottery, you see he's discussing MB mill bronze cooking pots. So it was kind of like a preliminary inside report at the same time. So there was a kind of combination of different means of publication, of recording, and also every object was drawn on the millimeter paper. I didn't bring these pictures, but there's like loads of them in Pittsburgh. He, I'm not even sure that he paid them, but there were many people who actually were employed in drawing the finds. It was quite a project because he had a lot of finds, including high society like Norman Benkwich, who was the prosecutor here in the Palestine jurisdictional system. So his daughters actually, they went to work with him and to draw the pottery that he found. We should mention Melvin Kyle. Again, without Kyle, it's very probable that this excavation would have never took place. He actually paid for most, most of the money spent for the excavation, like $11,000 of $16,000 that spent for the whole 4 seasons. Some say that it was from his own money, that from his salary in the university. And this is why actually most of the documentation and finds went to the college where he was teaching. He was mostly like the president of the staff. He was dealing with PR, taking pictures in the field, and helping otherwise. Now, the logistics were terrible. Really, I excavate for 20 years. We have a lot of challenges. and thinking how they did it, like almost exactly 100 years ago. You can see this is the photograph from the archive that reached this institute months ago or so. This is the first season that they brought all the equipment, almost all the equipment with the camels. It's only later that they were able to get a car. He was very proud of his Ford car, and it was much easier, but still, it's very far from, even today, from any main road, so you can only wonder how they did it. In fact, you see, this is a citation of Wright, one of his students who actually participated in this excavation. I don't know if you really see this picture well, but again, it's not my words, it's his. It was less spent at Megiddo on a building, a balloon, and a tennis court. So the whole expedition of Beit Mirsim, as I mentioned, $16,000, 4 seasons. 4 seasons of 80 to 140 people. That's why, by the way, he never paid his student. I can be only sorry for his students, but it was done anyways. And you can see here, this is the Beit Mirsim expedition balloon. Again, this picture is from the archive. I've never seen anything published showing this leather that they most probably made of the of the wood found in the area. This is for their aerial pictures, as you see. And now when you go through the documents in SUNY Institute, you can see everything was, they really had to count every penny, every cent. From you see this check, by the way, you see that Kyle signed it when he went to get some cash from the Barclay Bank, which is located only like 10 minutes walk from here, and two small sums of a few cents, like sending telegrams. Everything was written down, counted, and everything was planned every season. So it must really was very, very hard for Albright. He was running everything by himself. Everything is his handwriting, and I cannot even again start thinking how he managed to do this and the scientific part at the same time. And together with all this, they actually conducted some touring at Beit Mirsim. You see ladies, most probably from Jaffa, Tel Aviv, or Jerusalem, coming for a visit. There are some other pictures that you see. You can even see kids coming to see this already by then famous excavation. And it was also kind of a field school for his students. Albright actually mentions that most of his students at the beginning of the excavation, of his field managers, had very little, if any, field experience, and they actually they got this experience during the excavation at Beit Mirsim. Now, another challenge was actually working with the local workers. Now, it was not really clear how they did it, and we know of a lot of problems that most probably were because of this, let's say, difference of mentality between the Westerners and the people who live here. There's a lot of stories like this. First of all, Albright mastered Arabic. His Arabic was fluent. And still, he used services of people who actually lived here. Now, the land that Beit Mirsim is located on did belong at the time to people at Kfar Dura, which is located some 6 miles northeast from there. And he had to deal also with paying the people. So he used, again, he used the services of the foremen who were brought from Egypt, but also he made personal contracts, you see here, Thanks to one of our first volunteers, Oran Notea, who can actually read handwritten Arabic. So he translated most of these documents, and he actually made these contracts with the locals through the Muhtar, the head of the village, and everything was almost all the time very clean, clear. So this contract said that he actually pays for using this land, which was supposed to be used for agriculture, and in the end, he promised to cover the excavated area. But later, we have addendum to every contract like this, where actually he says that instead of this, he will pay another few pounds for the owners of the land to cover these areas themselves. Again, lucky to us, it was never done, so we can actually still visit the excavated areas. So there was, again, quite a lot of pressure, most probably. And again, another challenge for Albright, because he did all this, he had to manage all these things himself, not Kyle. I think Kyle was not capable of doing such things. Now, Kyle, he wrote quite a lot. He wrote a book about the expedition and living in the camp. So one of the things was when I first looked at this is plate number 1 in his final report, he actually marked the campsite at the plan. And I had somehow an idea, let's go and excavate the excavators and let's go find this camp. So we used aerial photographs, and we actually managed to fit. You see, this is the enlarged portion of the plan to the actual walls or remains of the walls still found in the field. So today we know where this camp was, and I still cherish, let's say, a hope one day to actually open a few squares and excavate the excavator for real, like a real archaeological excavation. What could be cooler than excavating Albright, right? So actually, we can even recognize different parts of the camp, like, for example, the kitchen. And this was kind of a guard tower. This was the hut where the guard of the camp lived. There's another picture. So you can see again 1 and 2. This is the kitchen and the hut of the guard. 3, this is the mess hall where they ate. And 4, the most important, and I will get how much time do I have? 2 minutes. I will show you in a second. The most important thing, this is the pottery reconstruction shack. You see, this is the mess hall. This photograph was published. Here you can see a couple of pictures from this archive. You see, this is actually Abu Elias. He was also, he worked in Syria and then he joined Albright. This is the cook. So this is actually the cook of the expedition. And here, I don't know, didn't find any names. One of the workers shaving the other hair. It's really cool, I think. And again, this actually it's here. The pottery shop you can see still being on site, like 2 meters from the site. Every day, they actually put all the pottery found that day. Albright himself checked twice all the shards, and then you see they made all these pictures are from this archive, and then they had to put it by period, by type, and eventually they conducted the reconstruction of pottery on site or in the camp, which is actually the same. So you can see this guy again. He came from Egypt. I only understand his name was Mahmoud, not more than that. I wish I could find more about this guy, but you know, I'm looking at our preservation lady, reconstruction lady, and like all the challenges that she has today in the lab. He did it actually in the field. You can see here he's actually boiling the glue. in the field. And so this is really still unbelievable. And for me, you can see here he's sitting with his mill bronze jar and some Iron Age craters being reconstructed at this very moment. And so the last slide is actually the picture of the cupboard, which is located just right to you. And this is really the mother of all pottery readings. It's literally like the bones of the of the holy of the martyrs in the 5th century or something like this, because you can see actually all the typological patterns which go like stratum by stratum. Igor mentioned that every archaeologist back then, like in 60s and 70s, were obliged to learn this strata in Beit Mirsim. That actually all this still exists here in these drawers, and this is really you really must do something about it. Because this is the really like holy grail of the archaeology in the Middle East as we know it. And that's it, I think. It was really like a glimpse into the life of this expedition, based again on all these documents and pictures that I actually excavated in these archives. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. And you heard it here first. The Holy Grail is at the Albright Institute. So
Yes.
this is what happens when you take things out of context. This will be in the headlines tomorrow. So thank you very much. Yes, thank you, Michael, for that, for a wonderful glimpse into Albright's expedition. And I think it's fantastic, the idea of excavating the excavators. But also any excavator out here, just remember someone may end up excavating you, so be careful in what you leave behind as well. To kind of round up our session, we're joined live from New York by, wow, I just realized what that is, live from New York, coming to now, Rachel Hallote, who will take up talking about Albright's work at Beit Mirsim and a bigger picture, and looking at how early American archaeological projects shaped research in the region and their lasting impact. So we will be moving now to Rachel.
Thank you for inviting me, first of all. And those previous two presentations were fantastic, and I really enjoyed them. What I'm going to do in the next few minutes is explain the place of Beit Mirsim in the history of American involvement in excavations in Ottoman and British-controlled Palestine. Beit Mirsim is deeply associated with William Foxwell Albright and with what's now called the Albright Institute, which in the days of Albright, before it was separately incorporated and renamed for him, was the Jerusalem home of ASOR, the American Schools of Oriental Research and Study in Jerusalem, as it was then called. Our questions are, what were Americans doing in terms of excavations before the excavations of Beit Mirsim? And how did Beit Mirsim influence the archaeological work of Americans and others that came afterwards? When Albright, when Albright came on the scene, there was already a long history of British and European excavations and only a short history of American projects. Prior to World War I, the United States had not been particularly active politically in the Middle East compared to other Western countries, nor had it been terribly archaeologically active. There had been Edward Robinson's 2 geographic trips. There was the Lynch expedition, which is often counted as a prelude to archaeology, but was more about exploring the lay of the land. Lynch hoped to find that the Jordan River could become an important shipping route. It didn't. And there was an American archaeological organization, the American Palestine Exploration Society, which was the forerunner of ASOR, which had assisted the British in their survey of Palestine in the 1870s, making a map of eastern Palestine, although the British deemed it inaccurate and ultimately re-surveyed all of eastern Palestine. Here on the slide, you can see how the American team got the Jordan River wrong. And notably, Frederick Bliss, one of the first excavators of the British Palestine Exploration Fund was American, even though he worked for the British. Bliss took over the Tallahassee excavations from Petrie, and then went on to excavate other sites, several other sites, including Jerusalem and sites in the Shvela. Not only was Bliss American, but he was part of the rather prominent American Bliss family that had founded Syrian Protestant College, now American University of Beirut, an institution which had often helped facilitate American ventures in the Middle East. But in truth, it was the British and the Germans who had taken the lead in excavations. It wasn't until the Samaria excavations beginning in 1908 that the Americans had their own excavation project. Samaria was led by David Lyon of Harvard, who in 1906-07 had served in Jerusalem as ASOR's director. It was likely Lyon's presence in Jerusalem that year that enabled him to secure the firman from the Ottoman government for Samaria. After hiring Schumacher for a season, Lyon ultimately brought on George Reisner to direct Samaria. And then came World War I, which solidified Britain's political as well as archaeological interests in the region. At the end of the war, Britain was granted the mandate over the southern Levant by the international community, and those new governing powers meant that it ran the Department of Antiquities, first headed by John Garstang. Meanwhile, the United States had not been a player in the Eastern Front in the war, and only at its end did Americans get more involved politically, notably via the King Crane Commission. ASOR, then called the American School of Oriental Study and Research in Jerusalem, and hereafter I'm just going to say ASOR, regardless of its incorporation of the Baghdad School a bit later, and its later name changes more recently. ASOR was founded in 1900, but did not undertake any excavation projects prior to the war. The aforementioned Samaria expedition was Harvard's project, but ASOR had wanted to have its own excavation for a long time. Since 1916, Charles Torrey, ASOR's first director and later chairman of ASOR for many years, had been angling for a firman for either the site of Tel el-Kadi, Dan, or Sidon, both of which were thought to be, at that point, they were both thought to end up under the French firman, under French administration. It wasn't until 1923 that it was resolved, and they ended up under, that piece of the land ended up under the British. And in fact, a firman for Tel el-Kadi was actually granted under James Montgomery, his directorship of ASOR. But Montgomery ultimately turned it down. He felt that it was more advantageous to work within British mandatory territory than within French. He wrote, it might possibly be easier to negotiate with the British administration than it would be to negotiate with the French. Meanwhile, 25-year-old William Boxwell Albright had been appointed ASOR's Bayer Fellow in 1916. But had to wait until after the end of the war to travel to Jerusalem and take up the fellowship, which he finally did in 1920. By the end of that year, due to personal issues, actually personal and personnel issues within the ASOR staff in Jerusalem, William Worrell of the University of Michigan, who had been director for the year, resigned. Albright was immediately made acting director and soon thereafter was appointed director himself at the ripe old age of 29. As soon as Albright took on the temporary directorship in 1920, he was asked to find a site to excavate. While he'd considered other sites, including Tel el-Dur, thanks to conversations with Frederick Bliss, he ultimately settled on Tel el-Ful. He wrote to Montgomery, I am now considering the question of excavation and hope soon to send a full report on the subject. Work is now being carried out at Capernaum under Orfali, at Ophel under Slouch, not so far of any consequence, and at Beit-San under Fisher. Soon, he asked for a permit to excavate Tel el-Ful. The British granted the permit, and Albright began excavating Tel el-Ful in 1922, and he worked there through 1923. As his biographers, Running and Freikman, have pointed out, Tel el-Ful was the first Israelite site to be excavated as opposed to Canaanite sites. That choice was very much in line with Albright's biblical bent, which in turn was in line with American Protestant religious traditions, which had so often led to interests in the Old Testament as opposed to the New Testament. This had been in evidence in various forms since Puritan days, and can archaeologically be seen through Robinson's Congregationalism and now Albright's Methodism. Albright hoped to confirm the identification of Tel el-Ful as Saul's Gibeah, and indeed excavated a main structure that looked like a fortress, seemingly in line with the biblical depiction of Saul's reign and capital city. Immediately after the end of the Tel el-Ful excavations, Albright set out with a small group of ASOR students on a trip to explore sites in the Dead Sea region, which was followed by a 10-day trip through western and southern Judea. The group visited Tel Beit Mirsim, which had already been thought to be Debir Khirbet Sefer of Joshua, one of the Canaanite cities captured by Joshua. In other words, like Tel el-Ful, Albright was interested in Tel Beit Mirsim probably for its potential biblical connections. The identification of Tel Beit Mirsim with Debir is not generally accepted today. Excavations at Tel Beit Mirsim began in the spring of 1926. In his first report, Albright explained that because of ASOR's lack of funding, this expedition would be a collaboration like the few previous ones. The 1924 exploration, sorry, I should have switched slides before I showed you the biblical quote, sorry. The previous collaborations had been, the 1924 exploration of the Dead Sea Valley had been done with Melvin Kyle of Xenia, and there had been a 1926 collaboration with William Bade of the Pacific School of Religion, who was excavating at Tel Anasbeh. Now, for Tel Beit Mirsim, Albright collaborated with Melvin Kyle again. He arrived at the site on April 1st, 1926, with a team of 79 workers and worked until April 18th. He published his first preliminary report right away in the October 1926 edition of ASOR. He wrote, and I'll skip around a little in this quote, that we cleared nearly the whole line of the Jewish wall. Jewish was a term in that particular time frame often used for Israelite, and uncovered the Canaanite revetment down to the Virgin Rock in several places. Nowhere in Palestine has the writer seen such ideal conditions for precise stratigraphic results. The site is free from encumbrance and exhibits 3 very strongly marked burn levels belonging to 3 complete destructions of the city by fire. Thanks to the careful study of the pottery from the successive strata and substrata, it is possible to describe the history of the town already. His excitement about the stratigraphy is clear from this early point, and his excitement about the ceramic sequence he put together from his work at the site is even clearer in that he chose to make the first full volume, the first full volume of Tel Beit Mirsim Final Reports, a volume on the ceramics published in 1932. He notes in that publication that he's following the model of Rowe and Fitzgerald at Beit Shan. He also points out at the outset that the stratigraphy of Tel Beit Mirsim is so clear because of the many clearly visible destruction layers, which allowed the pottery to be dated precisely. In the 1920s, there was, in the middle of the 1920s, in fact, in 1925, there was another major excavation going on, had just begun, the Megiddo excavation, right? And there was certainly some competition between the Chicago team at Megiddo and Albright. Chicago, when they began, immediately built, first of all, they bought the land outright, and they immediately built a dig house that was intended to be permanent and is still standing today, as you can see. Whereas the Albright team, the ASOR team, had no permanence and had to be borrowing funding to get their excavation off the ground. The other thing that Eric Klein has uncovered is that there was certainly a rivalry between Albright and Chicago. When Albright attempted to visit the Chicago excavation in 1925, he was actually not allowed to go up onto the site, and Klein posits that that was because of this rivalry between them. And I just wanted to point out also the small scale, which we've already heard about today, the small scale of the the Tel Beit Mirsim excavations, people had to pay their own way. They had to borrow equipment from other excavations. Okay. Now, how did, let me just skip to here. How did Tel Beit Mirsim, which was so small scale, how did this excavation influence others that came afterwards? Albright's, well, the other thing I'm missing in my page of notes, my apologies, is how, first of all, Albright published right away. He published, his publications touted the ceramic sequence as well as the clear stratigraphy. And the site was not excavated re-excavated, obviously, until recently, as we've just heard. How did the excavation influence others that came afterwards? Albright's excavation was influential as it made prominent various techniques, I should say, that had already been used by others, like the Reisner-Fisher method. The excavation would always be associated with good stratigraphic and ceramic investigation. And soon, in the later years of the 1920s and into the 1930s, so many other excavations went into the field in Mandatory Palestine, including Jemma, Jerisha, Beit Shemesh, Farah South, Rasul, Tel Abu Hawam, Ajul, Jericho, Samaria, Beit Zur, which Albright co-directed, Lachish, Bethel, also directed by Albright, Abu Salima, and Khalifa. All of these were, of course, aware of Albright's excavations, as well as all other contemporary excavations, such as Megiddo. But of these many excavations that followed Tel Beit Mirsim, not that many were American. There's Tel Nasbe so I've outlined the American ones in blue. There's Tel Nasbe in 1926, Beit Shemesh in 1928, the Samaria joint expedition with the British in 1931, Beit Zur, which Albright eventually co-directed, also in 1931, Bethel in 1934, also directed by Albright, and Khalifa in 1938. Of all of these, the legacy of Tel Beit Mirsim in particular is very much tied to Albright himself. And I'd actually posit that the most influential way we see the legacy of his excavations comes a little bit later, when the Shechem excavations were started in 1956. These were directed by G. Ernest Wright, who was one of Albright's most important archaeological and biblical students. Wright had worked with Albright at Bethel starting in 1934, meaning he was directly trained by him. And Shechem led to Gezer in 1964, also initially directed by Wright, and then by his students, Wright's students, including Deaver and Seeger, and the Gezer method was born. And all this work from the second half of the 20th century helped to solidify both Albright's position and his main excavations at Tel Beit Mirsim as formative. What you're looking at here is part of the AGNES project, the Academic Genealogies of Near Eastern Scholars project that Eric Klein and Diane Klein and myself worked on a few years back. And you can really see Albright's legacy within the discipline as a whole in terms of students, grand students, great-grand students, etc. And in terms of excavation, the American methodology of small controlled trenches and careful recording moved from American dig to American dig, as you can see in this rather unfinished chart. So in certain ways, Albright and the Tel Beit Mirsim excavation's legacy continues to the present day with the numerous digs in Israel and beyond, which are directed or co-directed by American institutions. Thank you.
So thank you all. I think I can tell you one of the things that I realized is that there are different aspects here that we could talk about. And honestly, I would love for each one of you to have a whole evening to talk about things. But as we can't go back in time, we'll start. So let's start with the crowd in-house. Any questions for any of our speakers? Isan, I may have to reiterate so people can hear.
In this lecture, you were talking about the survey that you was doing in the lower city, you said, or the upper city?
Lower city.
So is it close to the village now? Village of Beit Mirsim?
Actually, no, so the question was regarding the survey that we just conducted a few weeks ago. So the survey that we conducted was south of the mound, not east of the mound. East of the mound today, we have the separation wall, the separation barrier, that basically does not allow us to go to that side, so we concentrated on the south.
So do you find any burials there?
Burials, we didn't find new burials, only ones that were already looted, but we did find many structures. Yeah.
Questions? I'm looking at people who are part of the Gezer, you were on there as part of the lineage, and I'm wondering what you think about this, but I think Norma, you wanted to ask a
Yeah.
question.
Well, it's just that it was so interesting, and I'm so happy that you're excavating the excavators, because I think this is so important, and I think it's a part of a new, well, not so new perhaps, but perhaps new to other people, a new trend. So I wondered, will you be publishing this separately, your excavation and your analysis of the excavators themselves and the excavation camp?
Yeah, well, it's a long way there, but yes, I was thinking again. It's like Albright. It's the matter of money, yes, but at least we have something in common. But I was thinking one day, really, actually opening squares, and we know most of the areas, most of the units, and even possibly in some cases, who lived in which tent. It's something that was trying to establish now. It could be really interesting, like a small side project, together with all archive material. I think like there's no more Albright heritage than that. I think, right? Yes, that's a long range plan.
You need to find another backer, the way Albright found a good backer. I think this is a,
If someone wants to
in the crowd, on Zoom at home or here, if you want to,
donate their salary to.
Yes, we need our Kyle. Yes.
a son.
Structure that you found centimeters below topsoil, is it because it was excavated by Albright, or it's just because it's?
No, yes, so the question was about the destruction layer that is found below topsoil. Is it because Albright removed the upper layers or no? So the case is that basically that was just the last habitation layer at the site. So we excavate from topsoil. We excavate in an area that Albright never touched. So and that's the great thing about Beit Mirsim. You just scratch the surface and you're already in the destruction layer. Iron Age 2B, yeah, late 8th century BC, yeah.
Okay.
Very, very lucky.
Yes.
And so I have to say, I was so jealous, or envious, I should say, of those intact vessels. You're not only just scraping the surface, but you get to intact vessels and a whole lot of those loom weights. I mean, seriously.
Yeah, that actually was one of the reasons that we came back to the site, because when we came back to the site, we wanted to study the economy and society of the Kingdom of Judah. And therefore, we needed a broad horizontal exposure of relevant layers. And therefore, we searched for a site that will facilitate that, so we don't have to go through later periods. So we don't have to excavate the Byzantine, the Roman, the Hellenistic, and other periods. And Beit Mirsim gave us exactly that. You have 8th century BC just below topsoil, so we can excavate more and more area, more and more complete architectural units. Yes.
Second, just, finish last.
So your goal to excavate there is to recheck Albright's excavation. And another question, that's the last question. Why did Albright choose that site in particular? I think I didn't hear an answer.
Okay, so first of all, regarding what we are doing, we don't try to recheck Albright. We have different questions. His emphasis was on chronology. We primarily focus on society, social structure, and so on, other questions. So therefore, currently we concentrate only on the uppermost layer. We don't go down to create an entire sequence, maybe someday in the future. Regarding the other question about why Albright chose a site, and
First of all, we don't really know, but generally he mentioned that again he was a really biblical archaeologist of those days, And it seems that after all, he was looking for a biblical site. And De Veer, he decided, by the way, eliminating many other sites, he decided that Dvir or Kiryat Sefer supposed to be Tel Beit Mirsim. Today, this is not the common opinion, let's say, put it that way. But he pinned down this site.
Yes, Tel Beit Mirsim.
Something he relied on.
What, in the name itself?
Yeah.
Not really. Actually, I was trying to understand what Mirsim in Arabic is, and I didn't really find, like, it's some very old dictionary. Mirsim, it's something like horses that running not very fast, something like this.
Trotting.
Yes, it's like very, very old Arabic. Not so. That's what I found. But we don't really know even the meaning. Everything lost. So there's no connection between the name of the site to the name of the village or the name of the biblical city. But he just did what we call historical geography, and he decided that this was the location. Yes.
Final question from the room.
Thank you very much. My question will maybe provoke a little bit, because talking about a sort of population, you have a city for people to inhabit. And so I looked at the design, it's a nice design, but I didn't find a place for a cemetery.
Oh, so the question is about the cemeteries, where the cemeteries.
Cemetery, there will be bones and things and so on, and maybe history in there also.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
it.
So the cemeteries were outside the city, and Albright searched for them, but he didn't find them. He writes that he tried to find them, he didn't, and only in after the excavations were over and the site became important, some people from the area, they did find the cemeteries, primarily west of the site and some extent also east, and they looted many of those burials. And then some of those burials were re-excavated, but probably there are more burials that were not found. Maybe one day someone will find them and will excavate them.
Did you get any history or anything?
Well, most of them are from the Iron Age. There are some also from the Bronze Age, but most of those that were excavated were disturbed because they were already looted.
They were mostly shocked from.
Yes,
Yes.
structures. Yeah.
So I'm just gonna try to, I'm sorry, I'm not very good with technology, and I'm looking on to try and get the questions from the chat. So let me just, and there are a bunch. And I'm just going to.
I'm one of those who really studied very thoroughly all those ceramic plates back in those days as a student of archaeology. And today, when you're looking for more modern, scientific, accurate dating elements, where does it fall, the pottery, the fact that we depend much on the pottery? And what is the value of it nowadays? Is it still logical?
It is still very useful for relative chronology. You can still compare roughly the dates of different levels. Yeah, relative. But we get absolute dates in other means today. Primarily, radiocarbon is very popular, but also sometimes you do have those name-bearing finds or inscriptions that can date some of the layers more accurately. So.
So I'm shifting in, and we're actually starting not with a question, but more a couple of comments, which I think this is fantastic. So this is about Michael's presentation and trying to figure out who Mahmoud is.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of people, some suggestions. Someone who said if the pottery vendor was from 1932, it might be Mahmoud. And I'm sorry if I'm going to butcher this name, Huayem, who was the nephew of Berberi Mahmoud Aisa, who was the Rais of that season. And also, Michael, you had mentioned that he did not know, you didn't know the full name of Mahmoud, who did the pottery conservation. And there's someone who was saying that they have done some research on the Egyptian workmen on the project in Mandate, Palestine, and they think it may be Mahmoud Bouaim again, who was one of the Muslim thieves. So I think you may be getting some responses, and I think afterwards we should We
It-
should
it's-
look at this chat and the people who are sending this, because,
It's
It's
fascinating,
exactly what
and
we
I'd
wanted
love
to
to
do.
speak with him or her. Yes,
this,
yes, that'd be really great. Yes.
Okay. Igor Shalom, can you please elaborate on the context maybe, of the pottery vessels at the oil press you excavated?
Well,
The Videta.
okay, thank you. So, well, we have plenty of pottery vessels, but once I didn't go into that because that's not the topic of the talk today. But basically, what we found out that in the olive press, it was used as an olive press only part of the year because the olive pressing season lasts practically 2 months. And for the rest of the year, other activities took place here there. So we have plenty of grinding stones. In terms of botanics, we found grapes and flax and many other materials. So, sorry, so we have storage jars, we have cooking pots, but most of them are probably not related to olive oil production, but to other activities taking place. And that's still ongoing research, and we hope to get more, accurate results in a few weeks or months.
I'm gonna piggyback on this question and ask, the amount of loom weight that you found.
Yeah.
And in association with olive oil production, to me, very much reminds me of especially Ekron,
course.
the fact that they're doing this at the different times of the year, and it's a seasonal production. Is that the way you're viewing
Yes,
this?
definitely.
It's similar, but a little bit different because at the Chrome, it was separate from it was all centralized. But here we can see actually a family who maximizes the usage of the space. It's inside the same like Hamula, yes, it's inside the same family, but unlike any Chrome, okay, but the same kind of using the space, yes.
Question from Keith Afan. Did Albright have any contact or communication with Petrie?
I think maybe to Rachel.
Rachel?
Yeah, I think you can answer that better.
Yeah, to my, first of all, they must have known each other just in terms of when Albright eventually went back to dig in Palestine much later. So they must have known each other. And Petrie certainly stayed in the ASOR and in the Albright Institute. But I have not, I've looked at some of Petrie's archival materials. I've not found any confirmation of that. He did, as I mentioned, communicate with Bliss. So yeah.
Yes.
I actually in Pittsburgh, I found a letter from Petrie to Albright, where they discuss. It's clearly part of the much larger communication that they actually discuss Egyptian scarabs from Middle Bronze.
Nice.
Yes, it's totally unreadable, but yeah, it's his.
Right.
I was wondering whether maybe in some of these communications, the letters we have are personal ones, but it would be interesting to see whether he's mentioning, and he's clearly mentioning people, and whether he mentioned Petrie as well.
Yes, of course. Just to mention, yes, we have this evidence, but it must be scattered, all over the world.
Kurt Hoyer asks, will you be excavating in 2026? I think you may have some people who are interested in that.
Yes,
Joyce,
definitely.
nice, right?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
excellent.
you're most welcome to join us. We'll be excavating from February 22nd until March 13th. We'll be both excavating on the upper mound and also in the lower city, probably, just to start excavating the structures that we identified during the survey. So everybody is most welcome to join us or come visit us. We might even have another season in late August or September,
yes.
but we haven't decided on the dates yet. So. But you're most welcome to join us.
I'll wear this in the spring to Beit Mirsim. From Judith Frost. Was the figurine, this is to Michael, was the figurine we saw the only indication of artistic work? Or how about musical instruments?
Oh,
I guess it's
musical. Look, first of all, again, there's loads of figurines found there, but most of them, again, it was about to show something that was forgotten. But there's a lot of typical Asherah figurines, flutes and stuff like this. I think there was a Middle Bronze flute, but not Iron Age. Not anything that I remember right now.
no musicians. It is a very unique figurine, by the way.
It is, yes.
Incredible. Okay. Was Albright a man that used archaeology to prove some of the stories in the Bible are true based on locations listed? I think we all agree that was what he was pretty much trying to do. I think this is right.
I think he was. I think so, but he passed a very long way from being very.
Accepted of.
I don't know. I really don't know how to answer that.
At first, in his, at least from what I remember, in his early writings, he'd taken a more traditional view, accepting, giving more reliability to the biblical stories as they are told. And as time went on, you see that his opinions shift a bit due to what was found and due to archaeology. But he was definitely one of those who did believe that the Bible was a historical source that can be studied and elucidated through through archaeology. Sorry.
Maybe I just really tried to how to put this in words, but maybe it's really interesting to show this opposition between Albright and Kyle, because Albright, no matter what he thought, he was first of all an archaeologist, and he always based his opinion on archaeology. Kyle, on the other hand, was a deeply religious person who put Bible first, and you can see in his notebooks. And look at these Philistines. Like for him, it was really the biblical story with a few stones around it. But again, Albright, he was first of all archaeologist also, always. That's what I meant. Yes.
So not questions, but just a couple of comments. So from Karen Bowden, who says the Beit Mirsim artifacts and archives in Pittsburgh are at the Castle Museum of Near Eastern Archaeology at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, a descendant of Xenia, is that what you said? Seminary. It has been closed for 2 years, but will reopen in 2026, and this material will continue to be available to scholars and the public. So I think that's really
First of all, by the way, this is the opportunity to thank Karen, because again, it's thanks to her that I had this opportunity, and I don't know where to speak, yes, but thank you, Karen. And yes.
Well, it's good to know and to be able to go and see. In addition to maybe excavating the camp, any plans to excavate the dumps? And great idea to excavate the camp, by the way.
I don't think we plan to excavate Albright's dumps. I'm sure there are plenty of interesting things there, but it's better to excavate proper context and invest
it's a bit too much, yes.
in that. And the dumps are so huge, it's maybe in another century.
Or walking around with it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what you would expect.
Maybe using iRobot Roomba and AI.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much our last question for the evening. This has been fantastic. Thank you to the two of you here. Thank you to Rachel, New York. Thank you to the people who are sitting here, and thank you to the people back home. This has been really fantastic and great for us. I think this is really, this is our second of 4 collaborations, the Albright Institute and the Friends of ASOR. And I think this one really shows where the fact that we all start, like we have this really nice, we start together and we continue together, and the fact that we keep on working together is really fantastic. So thank you all, and a good day and evening to all.